I want to thank my colleague from Vermont for being a strong voice on this issue and so many issues that affect the elderly and especially our veterans, as the senator chairs that committee. I'm always curious as to why it is that so many of the dark suits here in Washington are always after Social Security. That somehow, and I don't say that that there's some ill spirit there, that they're wanting to do something. Although I will say, I think the senator might agree that there are some who would like to privatize Social Security. We know that. They've said that in the past, or partially privatize it. But it just seems to me that so many people who get involved in this, they think this is just a little nick. I saw a cartoon. It was a barber cutting somebody's hair, and they had this huge ball of hair, and they were just nipping a couple little hairs off of it, as saying that's all we're doing with change CPI. So they think it's such a small thing, but it always occurred to me. I say to the senator, it occurred to me that those people making the decisions, the dark suits, these are all people that have probably good pensions, good retirement systems. They're never going to want for anything. And yet, somehow they just think, well, $658, that's no big deal, up to 75. But as the senator pointed out, $650, $58 in 1 year to someone whose income is $15,000, that could be a month's worth of food, 6 weeks worth of food.
Right.
That's a big whack. So I just asked the senator again, what any thoughts on
I do.
on why it is that we can't seem to go out and listen to people and come up with some other kind of an approach on this rather than getting this change seat?
That's a very important question, and let me answer it in several ways. First thought, let's be clear. We have some colleagues in the House and in the Senate who believe not just that you should privatize Social Security, not just that you should cut Social Security, they believe that the concept of government assistance in terms of retirement or government programs in terms of health care, they believe they're unconstitutional. They don't believe the government should be there. That if you're elderly and you have no health care, sorry, hey, you're on your own. So that's number one. There is a philosophical belief on the part of some that what government does should be very, very limited, and we should not be there to make sure that when the elderly people reach retirement age, they have security. The second issue, I would say, Senator Harkin, is one of the consistently, and this has gone on for years, long-term opposition to Social Security. You know what it's about? It's because Social Security has worked so well. If you hold the belief that the government is terrible, the government is awful, the government can't do anything, and you have a program which for 77 years has paid out every nickel owed to every eligible American, has a very modest administrative cost, is very, very popular among the American people, and you don't believe in government, that's a bad thing. So you got to start cutting it and doing away with it. Third point that I would make, again, no secret here. We have a significant deficit, and we have choices to make as to how we deal with the deficit. I think that when we lose $100 billion every single year because corporations stash their money in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens, maybe we might want to ask them to start paying their fair share of taxes rather than cutting Social Security. But we have colleagues who are much more interested in the well-being and the profits of large corporations than they are in the needs of seniors. So those are some of my answers to you.
Right, a couple of thoughts I just say to my friend from Vermont, those who say it's unconstitutional to do those things. I wonder if they ever read the preamble to the Constitution, which is, by the way, a part of the Constitution of the United States. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare. That's part of the Constitution of the United States.
Of course.
So now how we do that obviously can vary from time to time, generation to generation. But the idea that we are here to promote the general welfare as a federal government is clearly in the Constitution of the United States. Secondly, The senator, in his statement, pointed out that the idea that Social Security, that this is really a trust fund. People pay into it, they take out. Now, again, it's had some problems, but I asked the senator, if unemployment today were down to less than 5%, say 4%, what would the Social Security Trust Fund look like?
It would be much larger than it is right now because more people would be paying into it.
And so that date, that 2032 date, if we make no changes, they say Social Security will pay 100% out up until 2032, I believe it is now, something like that. That if, in fact, we reduce unemployment down to, say, less than 5%, that 2032 becomes 2050, 2060, 2070, and on.
That's right. But I think the point has to be made, and I see Senator Durbin here on the floor as well, and he's made this point, is that we can argue about how you go forward on Social Security, but we should be clear, Madam President, Social Security hasn't contributed a nickel to the deficit.
That's right.
Because it's funded by the independent payroll tax. So it is a reasonable question as to how we make Social Security solvent for 75 years rather than just the next 20 years. That's a good debate, and you and I have similar ideas on how we should tackle that issue. But it should not be considered as part of the deficit reduction effort. And it disturbs me very much because the administration has acknowledged that reality. And we have heard from them over the years that say, yeah, we want to deal with Social Security, but not part of deficit reduction. It bothers me that they have now injected Social Security into the deficit reduction debate.
One last thing I'd say to the senator, he mentioned that we have a deficit. We do. We have to address it. We all agree with that. Senator pointed out the offshore havens, businesses not paying their fair share of taxes. I might ask the senator also one other question. Isn't it a fact that, well, the estimates vary, but $1 trillion is not stretching the truth to say that the war in Iraq cost us somewhere close to $1 trillion?
I would say that most estimates suggest that if you look at both Iraq and Afghanistan, it may be 3 times that number.
Well, I don't know, but I've seen estimates up to $1 trillion just about Iraq only. So that was all borrowed money. So that has to be paid back.
Yeah.
So we're going to make the elderly and the poor and the students and the veterans pay for that?
Well, I would say you make a very, very good point. And I often point out to my Republican friends that you're looking at myself and I think yourself as some of the major deficit hawks. Our friends today who want to cut Social Security in the name of deficit reduction apparently didn't have a problem with the deficit when they went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan without paying for those wars, when they gave huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country without offsetting those tax breaks. So your point is very well taken.